Okay, so I should be doing like six other things, but I don't feel like it, and I'm still in Utah, and that's the thing. So I thought I'd just do the whole talk of this houses and what have you. Okay, number one, brief history of the Joe Corner. I've done a bunch of jobs that required me on social media all the time, looking for content, and I've cultivated this like series of pages that I check pretty much daily that has funny stuff. I used to make batch posts on my main feed. It got a little cumbersome, so I made a sub feed, and then somebody, I forgot who, started adding their own posts, and then it became a community of people who share stuff, right? Um, and it was based kind of around the like idea that it could be a place where people aren't shitty to each other, which is why I've always had those like, don't be no racist jokes, no sexist jokes, no transphobic, no fatphobic, no ageism, no whatever. You can find plenty of that shit elsewhere, and the goal has always been everyone's welcome at this. So, that's kind of like a funny place with a little bit of edge, but not like, oh, look how edgy I am by being like a racist shit. So, none of that. And obviously we prefer direct posts rather than read blogs, just because there's a lot of really good funny communities out there, and I'm talking specifically like stuff like Nerds with Vaginas, and they have good stuff, but they also have a history of treating specific groups like shit, and we don't want to give them the reposts. That said, I'm not gonna I really don't want to turn this into a gulag of like shaming behaviors as, oh, you're not a good enough ally. Do your best. But I've reposted from them too after making making this rule. So sometimes you're just on a train and oh, it's funny, click, done. So that's that. The houses, right? First, I've always been a sucker for like the whole, Harry Potter, sorting hat houses. They're fun things to kind of talk about, like, oh, are you Gryffindor? Are you Ravenclaw? Are you Slytherin? Blah, 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 blah. And I sort of quietly noticed that the stuff that people posted tend to fall in specific types of humor, and the stuff that people liked most often tended to fall into specific types of likes. And so I kind of riffed on that and made the little houses, and I kept the description vague, but people are asking about it. Caveat, don't take this too seriously, please. Mostly, when I'm off handing out points, it's mostly just, oh, that's the thing I find funny, and it's not that hard to figure me out. If you put up gothy vampire horror bullshit or bunnies or whatever, I'm going to like it. Or if you're Alex and you just know how to dad joke my last nerve, then whatever. Anyway, let's see, where was I going with all this? I should probably look up the houses right now. So distract yourself for a moment while I do this. Lum-da-dum-da-dum. I hope you're all having a great holiday Thanksgiving time. I'm still in the magical land of Utah because that's a thing I do a couple times a year to visit my family. They all live here because life is mostly tragic, and the things we want don't always happen. So sometimes you got to compromise. Sometimes you got to leave the magical coastal bliss that you grew up in, and then you stay in Utah. Anywhoosies, still looking. It's on one of these threads here. Oh, bummer. I'm just gonna pause this. Pausing. Okay, so I found the thread, and I had a chance to review the previous video, and ooh, you never look good on camera, do you? Anyway, so the houses, right? Like I said, again, grain of salt, please, for the love of God, grain of salt. I don't really have much of my own standard, except I likes what I like, and it's pretty easy to figure me out. So this is more just stuff I've noticed over time, how people react to things and what they like and what they post, things like that. So going down the list, Lurker House with Andrew Patrick as the head. These are both kind of newbies who are still finding their voice. People who are regulars and are always present, but don't really, they're more like they like and they comment rather than they do their own dumps, or they're just, frankly, too cool for school. And I mean that in a positive way. I consider myself too cool for school, which is why I was bad at it. Um, it's hard to pin them down. Their behavior is more based on like, or their house is based more on behavior than specific jokes. The more I see lurkers engage, the more I get a sense they fit into other houses. But I do think it's a specific personality type, one that's a little more chill, one that's a little more like watching, and one that's very good at the like sharp, like funny retort. So that's house number one. House number two is Glycon, I think we landed on, formerly Crowley. In the listing, they're seekers of esoteric minutia. What it really translates to is kind of cerebral. It's this weird range of like, it's actually very modern-y humor, like very internet, like not like non sequitur oddball humor. So it's very like weird memes and deep cut references and dad jokes, like real bizarre, like off on the sides thing. And I think that it's basically the most common house at this point because it's sort of the language of the internet. But in our little game, it's sort of become also the house of the occult weirdo, which we have more than a few of, and that's of course headed by resident occult weirdo David Wiggin. So next is House Lustful, the only house with its own very active page. The funniest thing to joke about in the world for a lot of people is sex, and to like poke around the edges of that stuff. And, anything that's like very much about sexual politics, sexual identity, or just good filthy smut jokes are House Lustful's sort of like area of expertise. And it's hosted by power couple Kramer and Kitty. They do have a secret house where they talk about life and experience and sexuality and things like that. They can, if you want, contact them or contact me and we'll put you in. It's a more ribald of a place. There's not as much like rules of good conduct here, so it's a saucy one. Next up is House Orlock. Oh, lustful. I like the word. House Orlock, which is, I'm proud to say, my house. They're like, I think that there's a kind of comedy that has a bleeding edge to it that's got a little bit of a sharp point to it. And I've separated this into two sort of houses. And House Orlock is the more sort of like dark, self-destructive, kind of sad or rueful edge to humor. It's very like, oh, what a bright, beautiful day, time to kill myself. So it's a lot of those sort of like gloomy, dour jokes. It's also where I sort of shove my anything that's horror related or sort of dark arts, dark macabre. It goes into that house or its partner house, Redcap. It's obviously named after Count Orlok from the original Nosferatu film, or Orlok from the horrible Lemony Snicket's Series of Unfortunate Events. That's what it's called. Okay, Doolittles are, of course, headed by... Oh, and I should mention House Orlock is headed by Lisa Neff, who works in a morgue and is my proxy because I can't run the house myself. Next up is Doolittle, which is the powerhouse group of Tori Luce, who is a distinctive presence on this group. Y'all know her, y'all love her. That is the house for, the internet runs on cute cat videos. And nobody does cute cat, cute pet, cute whatever like Tori. And, it's anything that's like funny and animal-y or funny and cute, things like that. And it's just like, it's where pets go and they do pet drops and talk to her about it. I will confess animal humor is like the least interesting to me because I'm not really a pet guy, but she throws a bunny on me and I'm kind of a sucker for it. Anyway, and obviously named after Dr. Dolittle, the movie about the guy who could talk to animals. House Lambda, hosted by Jason Watson, which is one of the two most consistent performing houses in terms of points. They're pure pop culture jokes. So anything that's, a riff on a superhero, a comic book, a video game, a weird whatever, like pop culture TV show, pop culture thing, it's anything like that. That's automatic. Like that's a Lambda house. Lambda are named after the house, the fraternity house from Revenge of the Nerds, which, despite being an incredibly problematic movie, is also one of my favorites, and I really, really love it. So, Lambda are the nerd house, and they are also, frankly, most of us are in it in one form or another. Next up, the other dark house, the house for dark humor, is the Red Caps, and they're named after the mythological, like, Celtic fae creatures that supposedly dip their caps in they cause severe mischief, and they dip their caps in the blood of the enemies, and they are headed by Alice, who that house specializes. It's also the same kind of horror, dark humor stuff, but whereas House Orlok tends to be more gloomy, House Redcap tends to be more malicious. So it's like a little sharper humor, a little bit more like fuck you to it. And yeah, they're fun. I love their stuff. The next one is House Vetinari, headed by Justine Young. And they're called in my original description, because it was being all vague and arty, the fools in King Arthur's court. But they're one of the houses I would probably sort myself in. They're political humor, they're brainy humor, they're anything that has to do with like mocking the world around us in this day and age, which God knows is plenty of content for mockery. So if the jokes are more political, more whatever, or more commenting about the world at large and the way we treat one another, that's Vetinari. They're named after the leader of the town of Ankh-Morpork in the Terry Pratchett Discworld books, who is a very sort of benevolent tyrant and a pure political animal, and I love him to death, and that's there. So the last house is, and the one that we tend to see the least of, but another one that probably I fit into well, is Takeuchi. They're described as champions of lights and love, but here's the gist is that Takeuchi is the feel-good house. Like, they're named after the woman who created Sailor Moon, and they tend to be for people who post a lot of like feel good about yourself memes, or hey, I know you're having a rough time, here's like a bit of happiness. It's anyone that sort of like brings that positivity into the world, which I think is incredibly important to this group, and it's why I want us to be friends or friendly, and people come in and have a good experience, and it's because there's this sort of underlying we're going to treat you well here. So that's Takeuchi. Never really had a house head. I have a couple of people that I think would be good fits for it, but I need right now it's just sort of a subgroup that it's around. So those are the houses. It's all explained. This whole thing is almost 15 minutes, and I hope that helps. So there you go. Bye.